can parents do to help you with that? So we've talked about, okay, 10 minutes, you can identify in that 10 minutes there's a problem, but that's not going to give you time to fix it. So do the parents reach out to the school? Do the parents, because if they're not already talking to their kid and their kid's not bringing the problems to them, the communications line aren't there. They've got to forge a new communication line. Is the school the best resource for them to get started? Because they got to start somewhere.
Absolutely. I would compare it to like you have a young child at home. They get an ear infection. Are you going to treat that?
Well, I'm not supposed to, but you know.
No, but maybe. But you know, where you're going to go to the doctor, right? I mean, go somewhere. Go if you don't know, go find someone who might. Even if they don't have the answer, like go somewhere. Like if I, as a school counselor, if I don't have the answer for you, I'm going to try and send you where we can get help. Because again, I can't solve all your issues, right? A kid could leave high school in perfect condition. You know, air quotes, right? Perfect condition. But they still got the rest of their life where shitty things are going to happen. So as a parent, involvement, trying to find the answer, because that's what you're teaching your kids too, right? Like as you're going through life, you're going to encounter adversity. You got to deal with it. Let's help our kids do that as parents by showing them what to do when you don't know. I don't know is a fine answer. You just got to do something with I don't know. You can't I don't know and then quit.
Well, that's the back half. That's your big deal, Scott. I don't know, but let's go find the answer.
Yeah.
I think that circles back around to the topic at the very beginning of the show where you guys were talking about parental involvement and how it relates to income. And I think that's it's interesting. You'll always get, or at least from what I perceive, you're always going to get a higher level of parental involvement at a higher socioeconomic status. And so I think the hard part for a lot of parents is trying to find a way or trying to find their level of input, how much they can input. And sometimes it feels like a lot, especially if you've got both parents working jobs, all that sort of stuff. But I think it's just about making a concerted effort to put to do something, whether it's signing your kid up for tutoring because you can afford that and being really involved with it because you can get time off work, it's great, or just going to a counselor at your school and just saying, hey, you know, I'm resource limited as a parent. Right. What can you do to help me with that?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know we can edit this out in post, so I'm just going to be frank. That's fucking shit. Parents, not your comment, just the overall concept. Sorry.
Yeah.
The parents not being involved with their kids is shit. If that's their cop-out excuse, whether it's work or whatever, if the parent is a shitty person, it's not the kid's fault.
Yep.
It's on the parents to provide a better life than they had.
Sure.
And it pisses me off so bad when I hear someone say, oh, I don't have time. You. That's
a lot
your
of
kid.
it's a pride thing.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
Let me give you the other side of it. Don't cut it out because I think this is an important part of the conversation though, because it's all intertwined and it's a societal issue, right? I mean, we can debate on it, but man's been on the planet a long time, right? No matter what religion you aren't part of, you are told you need to find a partner, you got to make kids, right? That's pretty standard procedure, right?
Plus, it's fun to do.
Right? It is fun to do. If they know what they're doing, it's fun to do.
Depends. Sometimes it burns, right? No, everybody?
Oh, dear. And catcher and pitcher.
Taking a drink.
Almost got you.
If it doesn't hurt a little, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, that's right. So. If it's a pain in the ass, kind of depends on the day.
Oh, dear.
Anyway.
Point being, please.
Point being is
pull us out of this
back.
nosedive.
But if the entire planet is telling you that you need to have kids, and you're a stupid kid, and by stupid kid I mean all the way up until 30 years old. You're a stupid kid. You know, you get married or you don't, or you have a kid, and then you're like, oh shit, this is not what I wanted to do. It's not entirely their fault that they're not attending to their children. Now, I agree from the standpoint of consequences to your actions. You had a kid, so you better take care of it, right? But the average human being on the planet is not doing well. Like, think about it. Even in America, like, the average person doesn't own their own home. They don't have a 401k.
Right.
They're not doing well enough to even give a shit about what is going on the larger scale, right? I think that's what I find so interesting about people complaining about free speech and like gun laws and all that stuff. You can't even fucking put food on the table. Why are you talking about that?
But it stems from that, right? It's like, okay, I just got to start being really angry about everything.
Yeah.
And that's going to be my solution.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's part of the issue too. Is like societally, we need to find a way to tell people, to educate people, right? Educate people that just live the life that you want to live, right? Stop indoctrinating your children into certain religions this way or that. And that sounds like a biased comment. It's really not. It's just show your children that they can be whatever fuck that they want to be, and no one actually cares. Like whether you're LGBTQ or not, or gay or not, or straight or whatever, like statistically, no one gives a fuck.
Yep.
So why are we telling people that it matters? Just go live your life. And if you don't want to have kids, don't fucking have kids. And if you had a kid, take care of your kids, because that's consequences to actions, and that's fucking hand that you chose.
Right.
So
You have the tools and resources to take care of that. And at this point, between the internet, your friends, and everything, you know that dance.
You do.
If you're going to have a kid, you knew what you were doing.
Absolutely.
Keeps you out of other people's business too. Like the problem with people being so upset about other people's lifestyles is, I think, in part due to exactly the problem you're describing. They're not living the lifestyle they want to live, but instead of fixing that, they're going to get angry at everyone else that they're all happy. Like, why do you get to do what you want? It's like everyone can. You just need to do it.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, okay, I genuinely think that the reason that you brought up the LGBTQ stuff, okay?
Yeah.
I think the reason, it's been around and it's been developing and whatnot, but we've hit this in the last 6-8 months where it's just completely exploded. And I actually think that it's kind of a combination of everybody's point. Your average person didn't care. The big thing that I genuinely, and I think I can speak for everybody at this table, I don't care who you love. As the saying goes, wash your hands, okay? You can love whoever you want, wash your hands when you're done. I genuinely believe that the vast majority of the country genuinely believes that. Until they started putting stuff into to the kids. And now we're seeing where people are starting to push back on it. But I think that, and if everybody understood that, but we're also looking at 4% of the population making all the noise on the internet.
Yep.
So that's what everybody sees.
Yep.
It's only now that because of, now we're going into elementary schools and we're seeing this stuff, that now the silent majority is saying, oh, okay, now hold on. What in the world's going on here? Because I think for most of it, the average person did not care.
No, I'd agree with that.
I'm curious how much of that, Hank, do you actually see in? You say that you deal with older kids. I almost would imagine, just based off of the conversations that are happening in the U.S. about it, that the kids that are 10th, 11th, 12th grade are even more in the trenches when it comes to talking about trans issues and getting all this sort of education about the LGBTQ space and whatnot. Is there really that much of a presence of all of that stuff in school, or is it being blown out of proportion?
I think at my particular school, we have a really supportive teaching staff towards the LGBTQ community, and we have a handful of LGBTQ trans teachers at our school.
Okay.
So I might be an outlier.
Right.
So I see it a little bit more. I also, I try and be a well-rounded educator and individual, and so I help out with the baseball team, and I'm also the educator, I guess, supervisor over the anime club. And as maybe you did or didn't assume, a large portion of LGBTQ kids are part of that
Right.
club. And again, going back to what Topher was saying, I don't care one way or the other. I just want kids to be safe.
I guess maybe to clarify my question, I think a lot of people's concerns are around like specific like education actually happening during the education, like during the school day, education being centered around these topics. I don't perceive that. I
haven't seen it.
Yeah.
I haven't. And also it was a couple months ago, maybe even a year ago, there were some articles going out saying that counselors were indoctrinating kids into being LGBTQ or whatever. At least in my school, that's not going to happen.
Right.
I mean, the most I deal with it at the high school level is I know who the kids are that are LGBTQ or maybe are allies, and in most cases, parents know. right? If parents don't know, they usually know like something is going on. We're trying to find something. I mean, I think my 14-year-old at home is LGBTQ. Like, they're trying to figure out who they are, right? I mean, I think the conversation needs to transition from like being LGBTQ is good or bad, which I feel like is what the conversation, at least that's what it sounds like if it's good or bad to be on one side or the other. I think the reality is that if you are LGBTQ, your life is going to be more difficult. Mm-hmm. And as a parent, that is what scares me, right? Mm-hmm. Leaving the educator realm. For my child, I do not care what you identify as, what you think, how you feel. I just want you to be okay, but I also want you to understand that by being different, which is what LGBTQ is compared to the majority, like Topher was saying, your life's going to be more factually, right? People are going to single you out. You're going to have more awkward conversations. You may not get hired because of it, and you may not even have ground to like show that you should have been hired, right? Like, it just inherently, we know your life is going to be harder, and that scares me. Right. I'm pro it. I'm all aboard. Be whatever you want to be, but please understand that you're going to encounter some adversity that you wouldn't otherwise.
I had the exact same conversation with my parents when I started looking at getting tattoos. Right? It's like you're doing this thing, and the interesting part is like the tattoo is the choice, though, right? Where the LGBTQ stuff, you kind of just you discover it. You fall into it.
This might be a little controversial, okay? And I apologize, but the genuine question,
sure.
Okay?
I'll say no if I don't want to answer.
Is that whole premise, is that on the
what premise?
GL? Okay, so the gay and lesbian, I think in society right now, I don't know that I feel like what you're talking about is specific to the trans community, because it is more of I don't know how else to say this. It is more of a spectacle to look at. I feel like your average somebody that's gay, they might dress a little bit better than everybody else, but by and large, you're not going to know anything. We're really talking about what is standing out to people. I think culture today, gay and lesbian, nobody even sees it anymore. Is it specific to the trans that you're seeing where this is a true harder road?
I mean, for now, yes. I don't need. Maybe we can edit this out, right? As I compound my answer, I think. Let me rewind. No, I would say no, because if you are straight, you fall within society's do's and don'ts and assumptions, right? Like even if you are gay, you're still going to probably be scared to share that information in some circles. Yep. Not everyone on the planet is automatically accepting. It's gotten better, right? Just as I think that's probably what's going to happen with the LGBTQ community, because like you're saying, most of the planet does not give a fuck, right? I think societally, right? Like if you remove religion, not just Christianity, religion altogether, are we even having this conversation? Who gives a fuck?
Well, but to counter to that, I got 2 points on that. I think, number one, I think that LGB, the next thing that we're going to see is the LGB is going to break away from the TQ+. Okay, I do, and the LGB is going to turn into, that's a societal norm, where then we're going to have the other part. The next aspect of that is I think that the reason it's getting brought up and it's so at the forefront right now is because they were doing it in elementary schools. And at some point, graphic is graphic.
Doing what in elementary schools?
What parents are upset about, and this is, again, I'm going off of news. I don't have kids. I'm just going off of what's in the news. But there's books and whatnot talking about how to blow a guy and whatnot, and they're finding them in elementary schools. Now, this is not in this state. We're still pretty called A's and A's.
Mormons.
The Mormons still run this state, and it's not a lot of stuff that's going to sneak through the cracks
Also,
on that. But
thank you, Mormons.
I have such a hard time believing that. Like the preponderance of evidence that you would have to show me for me to believe that there are books in elementary schools teaching elementary school kids.
I actually wrote you a list. I went back and looked at all the clips and everything, because the ones that I'm taking as is not interviews. It's the ones that of parents at the school board meetings in front of them, and they're reading the book that they got from the library at the school that is in there. And I wrote a handful of it. I left it at the office.
Yeah,
but
I'll have to look into that. I have a hard time believing. What's your thoughts on that, Hank? I'm curious.
I mean, I would say, how many cases is that actually happening?
I don't know. I think
subject to. I mean, is it happening? I'm sure it is, man. Crazy shit has happened all the time throughout human history, so I'm sure it is happening. I would still say, we're talking about gotta be less than 1% of schools, right? Maybe I'm wrong, but I would have to imagine.
Well, it's very much.
Imagine it's like a few instances, and then every media outlet in the nation is going that wants that story to be true. They're going to cling on to those few instances.
I think it's a few states. I think there's a few states that have gone. California, New York. They've just.
I think that's
lost
what you want
plot.
it to be.
Maybe, perhaps.
Yeah.
And I could be. I very well could be biased. And I'm again. I don't have kids.
Yeah.
I don't.
I just don't know. I would say it hasn't happened at my kid's school, and my 14-year-old is as LGBTQ as it gets. So,
but let me.
At a school, my 14-year-old is not in my school line. Right. They're in another school line, which has a lot of.
So you have exposure to your school line,
as
their
well
school
as,
line, and your child is LGBTQ in a really conservative state.
Yes. So I'm not seeing it, and the quote unquote like bullying or negative effects is coming from pretty hardcore conservative Christian kids, and it's very few and far between.
Well, it's the same. It's the same spectrum. It's just on the other end.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, I mean, my kid's the one that likes to wear rainbows all the time, which I'm all for. I support it, but if you're gonna share that out, the person that's sharing that out is going to be the one that's targeted by the kids or people that hate that thing.
Well, that's what I was kind of saying by is it just the symbol-wise, right? So we've got, if you're gay and lesbian, if you're dressed in normal, and I'm sorry, but it is what it is. If you're dressed in normal, nobody really cares. It's when it gets wild and crazy and you're dyeing your hair rainbow colors and doing that and making kind of a spectacle out of it.
Well, I think about this too, though, right? You go back to the 80s, we had people wearing mohawks and different colored hair, and that era of human history was like, what the
dudes
fuck is
with
wrong
bell-bottom
with you?
jeans.
But now we look back on it and we're like,
docks.
yeah, whatever. So I think in retrospect, we're going to look back and be like, how are we getting mad? As somebody who sees blue hair and I'm like, what are you fucking doing? I think 10 years from now, I'm going to think to myself, how did that bug me?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think, why can't we just get to a point where it doesn't matter, right? Like, even... I want to compare this to racism, right? Because it's a group of individuals attacking or disliking one and vice versa, right? And you had two different routes that, the combat on racism went. You had Martin Luther King and you had Malcolm X, right?
Right.
The angry way of doing it didn't work, right? Again, we're still dealing with racism. It's not cured by any stretch. But I think by going about it, trying to go through the right sectors, we created a common ground where over time, the majority of people, I would like to think the majority of people don't care if you're black or not. Maybe I'm wrong. And I would like to think that the same thing is going to happen with the LGBTQ community. If you are whatever you are, that is awesome. Do your thing. I got some friends that are and aren't LGBT. Who gives a fuck? Why are we fighting?
That ties directly to Martin Luther King. Okay, Martin Luther King, what he was asking for transcends the black and white or anything else. It should be the merit of the man. Part two of this, and the only reason I give credit to this conversation at all is because if it is circulating in the elementary schools, protecting the innocence of the youth should actually be a societal norm. I really do believe that.
It's not, but
but it should be. But part two of that is welcome to America. Okay? What should bring us all together, I don't care if you want to dress like that. I don't care if you're black, white, orange, green, purple hair, green hair. Doesn't matter. Here, you get to do that. Go try that stuff in Russia. See what happens. Or literally anywhere else on the planet. It should be something that is actually celebrated because we do have freedom here, that you can do what you want to do.
Yeah.
Just, I think the only merit to the argument is okay, but leave the kids alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree.
You look at me like I'm going to give you
I was waiting for it on that one.
Well, I mean, the devil's advocate that I've played with you in previous conversations is then we get into the weeds, right? We get into the special circumstances. But I think broadly speaking, I agree with you. I just think you start getting into the weeds where you start talking about when does it become impactful for someone to have to get support for this. Like if you've got someone who as a younger individual, they're experiencing these things that maybe is leading them down the path where they realize, oh, maybe I am lesbian, gay, bi, trans, whatever the case may be. Particularly on the trans side, that's where we start to getting into like, okay, are there interventions that like medically that we need to start looking at that might have to happen pre-puberty, and is there scientific evidence behind it? But I think broadly speaking, I agree with what you're saying.
Well, okay.
And you're not going to do that for like a 7-year-old.
That's I think really that's why I think it's gotten so much traction, is because they are talking about young 7-year-olds.
Yeah.
Right? And again, well, Hank, to kind of in the beginning part of this conversation, you said these are kids. At 18 years old, you're a kid. You don't know what you want to do, right? You know, really and truly, it's scientifically proven. You shouldn't make any real life-changing decisions until you're 27. That's when that's like scientifically, that's when your brain's developed. So if you're trying to do the transitioning and stuff at a 7-year-old level, are they really in the capacity to make a decision like that? Because we're talking about life-changing, body-changing procedures.
Yeah, and that's where I got into, when we talked about this previously, the question that I posed to you was, if I had a test that I could determine whether or not that 7-year-old is absolutely 99.999%, I can, with that level of certainty, I can say they are trans.
Then all for it.
Right. But that's the crux of the argument, is like figuring out how much of the input do you take from the child? How much of the input do you take circumstantial? Like what are the ways that we can figure out whether or not these people do need this help? Because if in hypothetical land you're wrong and we could potentially be finding kids and helping them early, and we're not, that seems like a great disservice to these individuals.
But, okay, I'm stepping out on a ledge just to play devil's advocate back. I want to preface this, okay? If you have a 7-year-old that wants to be a pirate, he wants you to cut off his leg and gorge his eye out, are you going to let him do that?
Yeah, that's fair. I probably wouldn't.
7-year-olds play pirates. They play cowboys and Indians, or they used to anyway, you know? Where do you actually... really becomes like, okay, take it to a different subject. We've said that drinking, okay, you're not capable of making good choices when it comes to alcohol until you're 21.
Right.
Why is this? This has far more severe consequences. What if you're wrong and they change their mind? Then what?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
It's a very tricky.
Yeah, it really is super tricky, and also just the we're in like the infancy of this entire of this entire body of information when it comes to all of this stuff that's happening, and so it's just so hard to say one way or another.
Well, but to bring it back to Hank's point, like if we were to take it, Martin Luther King, if we were to take it as what we should actually prioritize is the merit of the man, and when I say man, I'm not talking men, I'm talking human beings. It should be merit of the man, okay? And if it is something that you need to transition and do, okay. But what kind of person are you? And is that actually going to make you happier? And are you going to be a productive member of society?
I think I want to devil's advocate both of you on this, because in part because I don't have the answer,
okay.
Right? But from the standpoint of like if you go overseas, right, suicide is legal, assisted suicide is legal, right? And I think part of the reason why that is because the feeling of suicidality is actually pretty normal. If your life is terrible and you don't want to kill yourself, then we should be worried, right? Like there's a certain level of sadness that makes sense, right? If everything is going wrong, why would you continually want to be here unless you have a purpose or a reason to want to be here. And I think that is what ties in with all of this, right? At 7 years old, I don't think that you know whether you want to be a boy or a girl. I don't. Yeah. But I do think that at 7 years old, I knew I was attracted to only girls, right? I knew that about myself.
Right.
And I knew that I wasn't suicidal. So if at 7 years old, a child can tell us that they are sad or suicidal, or they're attracted to something that isn't, quote unquote, the norm, we can target that we need to keep an eye on that child. Should we be cutting anything off or sewing anything on? I don't think so, because we don't know.
Right.
But I think we should probably be having some conversations with that individual or that child or that family.
To that point,
it's a nice middle ground. I like that.
Yeah.
Well done.
Why do we need to decide now, right?
Well, that's the biggest thing.
I got tattoos, right? It took me a minute, right? I had to figure out what I wanted to put on my body. It took time.
Yeah.
I loved all three of them. One of them, I'm 50-50 on. That changed, right? You know? So I think that's obviously something so much smaller, but at 7 years old, I don't think you can know what you should do. But I think you can know at 7 years old that something is going to be different than the norm.
Right. And I think, though, that's where I have such a hard time determining or formulating some sort of an answer to my own question when it comes to, like, if we are missing if there's some way that we could be helping these kids earlier on, and there's some sort of intervention that we could be making earlier on, that's the only reason that you would your statement would then be incorrect. As if there's, a trans person whose life is going to be so much better if we can transition them pre-puberty. That's at least the argument, right?
But what would be, and a genuine question, what would be better? Say they are, okay? Say that it's a full transition, like you said. We have a test, 99.9%. This person is going to be trans. What would be better about doing it before puberty as opposed to letting nature because puberty also does other stuff to body development.
Yeah.
It's not
this is where I am not equipped enough for this conversation.
That's fair.
But my understanding of the argument on a very high level is puberty does things to the body that are just completely, to your point, completely irreversible. So if you truly have body or dysmorphia, to where you think gender dysmorphia, to where you feel like you are in the wrong gender, then going through puberty for that gender that you feel is the wrong gender for you could be super detrimental.
It could be. But here's a devil's advocate again, as the educator, right? We can't even teach math right.
Yeah.
Why do we think that our society is going to come up with the way to deal with this, right?
I agree.
Our education system, which has been implemented forever, can't do it. So, I mean, it's not up to these four guys to figure out how to deal with this. I think what it is let's be accepting of how people are going to deal with it. As people who have more power than we do, make the laws, and let's just try and be as good a people as we can.
Well, and to that actual point, I think you're exactly right. And this might actually be the argument. What on earth are we doing talking about it in schools anyway? Schools really should be, because I know growing up, if you saw your teacher out at the Walmart, right? It was like, what in the world? She exists outside of the school? Okay, it wasn't that long ago. I don't know that this, especially, in fairness, you're dealing with enough shit as it is. To put this on top, why is the burden coming down on the schools?
And the reality is, I don't think it is. I think that's propaganda. In my experience, I think that's propaganda. I think that's, left or right or whoever. Somebody is trying to put this information out there. I think what we should be talking about at a nationwide level is stop being a f***ing dick and go to class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your kid's not in class. Who gives a f*** what gender they are? Go to class.
Well,
go learn something, right? Like, you can figure out whatever you are once you're not under my roof. Let's give you the skills to be a successful human being, whatever side that you're on. We don't need to cut anything off or sew anything on until later because you can't even count to 2.
let's master some basics first.
Well, and that circles back to the point that we were making earlier, where it's like it's just people being unhappy, and like when you're unhappy in your circumstance, you try to find outlets for that, and instead of healthy outlets being let's better these circumstances, let's find ways to be happier, to get hobbies, to make friends, all these healthy things that we should be doing, it turns into just hatred and how can I make other people feel as bad as I feel.
Yeah, for sure.
And that for this conversation in particular, where we're talking about a fraction of a percentage of the population, maybe it depends on who you're talking to, maybe a couple percent, either way, really, really low ratio there. Like, just let it be. What does it matter?
Or if it's not. Who cares?
Who cares? Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Why is this the focus?
Yeah, exactly.
On either side.
So many bigger problems that we could be tackling. Yeah.
Yeah, like how we should be the greatest country in the world, and we're in the middle of the pack on all measurable math, reading, writing.
Yeah.
Well, and here's why. Let me give you an example as to why I get heated having the conversation about importance of LGBTQ in schools, yay or nay, is because right now in the state of Utah, I don't know other states, but I know in the state of Utah, we teach calculus-based math. It's called secondary math 1, 2, and 3. Tell me, how many jobs are going to use calculus-based math?
With computers? None.
0.
I mean, really, unless you're going into engineering or high levels of science.
It's only high-level STEM
So
stuff.
why, as a 17-year-old kid, are we forcing you to take this math class, right?
But you don't learn about how to do your taxes.
Yeah,
Right?
that one.
Well, no, we have a class called financial literacy.
Well, the IRS
which
needs to make money
doesn't
somehow.
teach that, right? So again, and these are state regulations. I think that is the issue, and it's not that I think people at like higher levels at the district level are incompetent or at the state. I don't think that. I think they are competent, educated, well-respected individuals. But I think they're so far removed from what's going on, combined with, like Scott, what you were saying, with parents that don't even know. There are too many people that have no fucking clue what is going on at daycare that we're not trying to fix it.
Yeah.
Right? And I think we had a chance. When COVID happened and it was like, fuck, kids aren't going to be in schools. And then schools scrambled and we were like, we do what we always do. And we fill in the cracks because you guys are all idiots. And we made it work. Everyone was like, oh shit, we can do school online now. We actually can't. We just made it look like we could because you're all idiots. And so now we came back and we got a percentage of parents that were like, my kids did great on online. And we were like, that's because your teacher just gave you ones.
Oh, man.
No, any real improvements that can be made to everything we've talked about, they start at home.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're LGBT. It doesn't matter if you're struggling in school. Yeah. It all starts with a structure at home.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Whether any adverse reactions or anything that kids are going to face, if they've got support structure at home, it does not matter. They'll be able to overcome it because they will be a functional human being as they're raised.
True.
So there is no solution for society as a whole because it starts on the family level with the parents interacting with the child and being supportive.
For sure.
Yeah,
For sure.
I do agree with that wholeheartedly.
You get 17-year-old Alec going, I'll show you, parents. I'm going to smoke weed every single day and get a 4.0. I literally
That's
just
a real
said that
story.
to them.
Yeah.
And then I did it. And it only could have happened because they were so supportive.
Well,
thanks, Mom and Dad.
But again, like I think to a certain extent, and maybe this is too religious or not. I'm not religious. I'm spiritual. I'm not religious, right? I think to a certain extent we are who we are, and our parents help guide us in a certain direction one way or another. Yeah. But I think in a lot of ways we are who we are. I mean, if you were going to be, or whoever this individual is, was going to be defined to get 4.0 and smoke weed or whatever, I mean, yeah, you're obviously doing okay right now to be having this conversation with me. So, like, you're not a fuck up, So I think there's no correct way to raise a kid. Like, as a parent, if you love your kids and you do everything you can to support them turning out or not turning out is not on you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's decisions they make at that point, right? You are doing everything you can to help, and they have to make their own decisions.
But you have to show up.
Oh, I disagree with that so much.
Do you?
Yeah, with your guys' statement of they are who they are, I wholeheartedly disagree on that. Because if your child is making bad decisions, they haven't had to face consequences growing up, then there aren't going to be consequences, and they think there aren't any, they're making bad decisions. If they know when they make a decision that is quote unquote bad, be it society bad, or they just make a decision that they shouldn't have done, if there's a consequence for that, it's going to discourage them from making worse decisions in the future. Lack of education, and this goes back to the support. I'm not saying support and be friends with your kids. There needs to be structure. If kids grow up with training wheels that are permanently attached, they're going to hit the real world, and all of a sudden those training wheels aren't there. They're going to fail miserably and make bad decisions.
They meet the next broken system, our justice system.
Yeah.
But I think tying on that, let me elaborate more on you are who you are. From the standpoint of there are certain characteristics to my personality that were going to happen no matter what my parents did or didn't do. Like I am an openly outgoing individual. Anyone who meets me, like, that's just factual. I'm down to talk, right? And I am a hardworking individual. And I think there were things that my parents did to help improve those things, but those were factors about me that were probably going to be there no matter what. Okay. And I agree with you with what you're saying, that if you're teaching consequences, you're doing all those things, you're going to help for sure. But I mean, I deal with kids that got great fucking parents that put up, consequences and rules and help and all, and they still turn out fucked up. So I think it's probably somewhere in the middle. You can be a perfect parent, man, and your kid could still turn out to be a druggie and dead by 21. Because I've seen it happen. So I know that has to be true. So I think it's probably somewhere in the middle. But, I mean, it's just terrifying bringing another creature into the world.
Dude, you're not kidding.
But at the same time, I mean, to your point, Scott, there can't be a scenario where showing up and being there and being involved is a bad deal. Unless the parents, I guess, are entirely messed up in their own right. But show up and try.
Yeah.
Those are outlier cases at that point, right,
yeah,
that we're talking about. Yeah.
Or at least we hope they're outliers.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We hope they're outliers.
Right.
If you'd like that clip and would like to watch another one, click right here. If you'd like to watch the whole video, click right here. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We'll catch you on the next one.